Airbus A320 cleared for landing. July 7th, 2017. It's almost midnight, and Air Canada Flight 759 is on final approach. The pilots, experienced and confident, are moments away from completing what they assume will be another routine landing. However, within seconds, their Airbus A320 will come dangerously close to making aviation history, not for its success, but for the unimaginable catastrophe it narrowly avoids. What caused this near tragedy? How did a highly trained crew in a state-of-the-art aircraft nearly mistake a taxiway packed with 4 loaded planes for their designated runway? This is the story of the greatest aviation crash that never happened, Air Canada Flight 759. Air Canada Flight 759, an Airbus A320, departed Toronto Pearson International Airport on the evening of July 7th, 2017, bound for San Francisco International Airport. On board were 135 passengers and 5 crew members, including a highly experienced captain with over 20,000 flight hours and a seasoned first officer with over 10,000 hours. The flight itself was routine for the majority of the journey, but as they approached San Francisco, the conditions on the ground were anything but ordinary. Runway 28 left, one of the 2 parallel runways at the airport, was closed for maintenance. All lights on the runway had been turned off, leaving only runway 28 right operational for incoming flights. Pilots approaching the airport were informed of this closure through a notice to airmen popularly called NOTAM. NOTAM is a crucial document that provides updates on airport conditions. However, NOTAMs often contain several pages of dense information, and the details about runway 28 left's closure are buried deep within. During post-incident interviews, the flight crew revealed that the first officer missed this detail entirely, while the captain noted it but did not consider it significant. After all, the weather was clear, and visual approaches to San Francisco were routine for nighttime landings. Unfortunately, this confidence would soon prove costly. As the Airbus A320 began its descent, the pilots were cleared for a visual approach to runway 28 right. Unlike precision instrument landings, visual approaches rely heavily on a pilot's ability to align with the runway using their eyesight and visual cues. Typically, this is backed up by instrument guidance, such as the instrument landing system, but on this flight, the crew did not manually tune the ILS frequency. This oversight, combined with the challenge of spotting a single operational runway in the darkness, set the stage for a grave error. With no lights marking runway 28 left, the pilots misinterpreted the layout below. What they thought was runway 28 right was actually taxiway Charlie, where 4 fully loaded aircraft were lined up for departure. The taxiway's position lights and reflective markings mimicked the appearance of a runway in the darkness, and without instrument backup from the ILS system, the crew relied solely on visual cues. As the Airbus A320 descended past 1,000 feet, there were still no obvious warnings in the cockpit. The captain focused on the landing, continued his approach. Meanwhile, the first officer worked through his assigned tasks, glancing outside occasionally but trusting the captain's judgment. At 600 feet, subtle discrepancies became more noticeable. The lights didn't look quite right, and the aircraft's alignment seemed slightly off. At 400 feet, the first officer finally voiced his concern, but the descent continued. By the time the aircraft reached 300 feet, the danger became undeniable. Ahead of them, the silhouettes of stationary planes on taxiway Charlie were unmistakable. At that point, it was no longer a matter of misinterpretation, it was a crisis in the making. At just 200 feet above the ground, the full gravity of the situation began to unfold. The pilots of Air Canada Flight 759 realized that something was wrong. Instead of approaching an open runway, they were heading directly toward taxiway Charlie. Below them, 4 aircraft loaded with passengers and crew sat motionless, awaiting departure clearance. Inside the cockpit, confusion turned into alarm. The captain hesitated, still trying to reconcile what he was seeing. Meanwhile, the pilots of the United Airlines 787, first in line on the taxiway, noticed the Airbus A320's landing lights bearing down on them. One of them broke protocol and urgently radioed air traffic control.
Where's this guy going? He's on the taxiway.
This transmission jolted the Air Canada crew into action. Simultaneously, the air traffic controller instructed the flight to go around.
Good evening, Air Canada 759 with you, have my reach visual 2, right.
Unit 359, system standing 2 at right, clear to landing 2708.
The lowest recorded altitude of Flight 759 was just 60 feet above the ground, which was barely 15 feet above the tail of the second aircraft in line, a Philippine Airlines A340. To put this into perspective, just a second of delay in the go-around could have resulted in one of the deadliest aviation disasters in history, involving over 1,000 lives. After narrowly avoiding disaster, Air Canada Flight 759 climbed back into the night sky, following air traffic control instructions for a go-around maneuver. The flight circled the airport and safely landed on runway 28 right minutes later. On board, although passengers and crew were shaken, no one was harmed. The close call, however, demanded immediate scrutiny. Within hours, the Federal Aviation Administration and the National Transportation Safety Board launched a comprehensive investigation. During their initial assessment, investigators identified several factors contributing to the incident. The first was the misinterpretation of visual cues. With runway 28 left completely dark due to maintenance, the lights from taxiway Charlie created an optical illusion, leading the pilots to believe they were aligned with the runway. Additionally, the NOTAM had failed to adequately alert the crew to the runway's closure. This lack of emphasis on critical information raised broader questions about the effectiveness of a NOTAM as a communication tool. Another crucial oversight was the crew's failure to manually tune the instrument landing system for runway 28 right. This backup system could have provided precise guidance, alerting the pilots that their alignment was off. Investigators also noticed the role of fatigue. The pilots had been on duty for over 19 hours without adequate rest, operating during the window of circadian low, a period when human performance naturally declines. Consequently, the NTSB's final report issued several recommendations to address these systematic issues. They urged the implementation of enhanced NOTAM formats to prioritize critical information, improved cockpit training on nighttime visual approaches, and stricter regulations around pilot duty hours to combat fatigue. In response, both the FAA and Air Canada took decisive action. San Francisco International Airport introduced restrictions on nighttime visual approaches whenever adjacent runways were closed. Additionally, a new system called the Runway Awareness and Advisory System was developed, capable of warning pilots if they attempted to land on a taxiway. The near disaster of Air Canada Flight 759 stands as a sobering reminder of the complex interplay between human factors and technology in aviation. While the incident did not result in loss of life, its lessons carry far-reaching implications for the industry. One of the most critical takeaways is the importance of redundancy in flight operations. The crew's reliance solely on visual cues, without backing their approach with instrument guidance, highlighted a dangerous vulnerability. The implementation of the Runway Awareness and Advisory System is a direct response to this gap, ensuring that pilots receive immediate warnings if their approach deviates toward a taxiway. The incident also underscored the need for clearer communication of crucial information. The shortcomings of the NOTAM system, which buried the runway closure details deep in an overwhelming document, spurred industry-wide efforts to make these alerts more accessible and actionable for flight crews. Above all, Flight 759 demonstrated the irreplaceable value of situational awareness and teamwork in the cockpit. The ability to challenge assumptions, voice concerns, and rely on established procedures is what separates a routine landing from a catastrophic event. While this incident could have ended in the greatest aviation tragedy of all time, it instead became a pivotal moment for progress in aviation safety. Each new system, regulation, and procedure implemented in its wake represents a step toward ensuring that the skies remain among the safest places in the world. If you found this story as fascinating and insightful as we did, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, and while at it, we'd love to know your thoughts on the lessons from Air Canada Flight 759. Do you think the changes made after the incident are enough to prevent future near misses? Was there anything else that could have been implemented? Don't hesitate to share your opinion with us via the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.